Welcome into a new episode of the Fight HQ podcast. Of course, I'm Jason Floyd, as always, joined by the fighter Pete Raj Jr. here to break down UFC Mexico, which goes down here on Saturday. Lock time, currently 4 p.m. Eastern time with the prelims main card, 7 p.m. Eastern time. Of course, one of the finally getting actually a card on ESPN2. Seems like it's been a while since the UFC's actually been on regular ESPN, not ESPN Plus. Of course, we're here on a Thursday night to break this one down for you. DraftKings contest is up, so you can get that contest. Link to that contest is in the description below. Of course, if this is your first time checking us out, all we do is we break down the fights from the main event all the way to the first fight of the night. Then at the end of the show, we'll give you our straight-up fight picks, plus we'll answer some listener questions. Pete, how's it going, man?
What is going on, Jason Floyd? What's up, everybody? Pretty damn good card last week from a betting and success standpoint. Made the most of it. Not the most violent card. It tended to be a long card with lots of decisions and some controversial scorecards or some I was surprised I got some decisions correct that were probably just good bounces, and I don't necessarily know if I agree with it. Like going into the Tybura and Parkin fight, like I got Tybura late at like plus 750 or something stupid like that when the third round was going on, and I got lucky with it. But that's how this game is, right? Like you take the good bounces because so many times you're on the opposite end of it. Now I think here in Mexico it's going to be the complete opposite. I'm expecting volatility, violence, and just people gassing like crazy due to the elevation, and I can't wait to discuss that point with you.
Yeah, I know Pizza has been doing some research on how different fighters are kind of handling this situation. We have one fighter just showed up today to Mexico, and that definitely scares you a little bit when we're talking about the elevation that there is there in Mexico City. Of course, we got some fights on here that I feel like there's definitely one fight that I feel like you're going to have to take a stand on either way, and it's a fight that I'm really intrigued to see where ownership is, particularly on the Drew Dober side. I'm really interested to kind of see where that's at. Of course, I do got a couple prop bets that I've found that I do like to have plus money, so we'll get into that as the show goes on. Of course, we do have our Discord channel, totally free to join. That link to that Discord channel is in the link below. Also, we do have the offer from Stochastic, as you can get 15% off any MMA package that they do offer. All you got to do is use that promo code FIGHTHQ or just click the link in the description to take advantage of that offer they have over there. All the great tools they have over there. Pete, as we talk about game theory for UFC Mexico, I think to me it starts with the co-main event. Just because it's got violence written all over it. When you look at it, you have a young up-and-coming fighter who has only made it out of the first round once in 18 pro fights. And then you got Drew Dober, who, he's a tough SOB, man, and he can take some shots. And I know in our Discord channel, it seems like everyone's on Manuel Torres. That's why, I'm kind of thinking, if you tell me we got some lower-ish ownership on Drew Dober, I'm more interested in getting the Drew Dober in this fight.
Super interesting, right? I pre-tape and gut, just going off my gut. I like Drew Dober because of the experience. The guy's been there. The guy has, I think, let me look right here. I'm pretty sure he has the most experience on the entire card. He does. His opponent's win record sits at 693 wins and 393 defeats. He's fought the best within the game, the who's who, from pre-UFC to all throughout the UFC, old generation, new generation, and somehow he's not even that old. Drew Dober's, but like he's gone in there and he's taken a ton of damage. Has a crazy left hand. Wears damage decently well. As of lately, we have seen him start to struggle a little bit from fights being stopped via TKO or Frivola touching that chin. Everybody has an off switch. And does Manuel Torres have enough to get through Drew Dober in this situation when Manuel Torres is mainly a round one guy? What happens if it gets outside of round one? So many question marks. And when you have several fighters on this card with cardio questions, it's like, man, the UFC didn't do them any favors, or these guys didn't do their homework when they accepted fights, not realizing about having to acclimate to something as crazy as Mexico City. If people are undervaluing and are overlooking what elevation can do to you. I'm telling you, it's a major, major factor. Going out to Albuquerque, New Mexico, when I was training in my prime, I was going out, I was in fantastic shape. Went out there and I could not breathe for anything, and I was in fantastic shape. And it did not take until I think week 3 for me to actually start to feel somewhat normal again. And it's a real thing.
Mm-hmm.
Altitude sickness is a real thing. Lack of preparation. I mean, there's several fighters that we'll touch on, but I definitely had to dive deep into it. And all in all, I initially thought Drew Dober was going to be my pick. And we'll have to see. We'll have to see if I agree with you or not. But all in all, that co-main event, I think, is a must-have for DFS.
Yeah, I mean, to me, I'm going to want to get on both sides of that equation. There's other fighters on this card that are going to be very intriguing. You look at someone like a Raul Rosas Jr., Vince Morales, a relatively quick turnaround. One of the things when I was kind of doing my prep, a lot of fighters on this card, the last time we saw them was anywhere from June to September to October of last year. We just saw Vince Morales 5 weeks ago. Can he stop the takedown? But Raul Rosas Jr. is one of those fighters I kind of do wonder if he can't get the stoppage within 7 to 8 minutes. What does that, third round Raul Rosas look at? And even though Vince Morales' record in the UFC is not very well, this is a tough guy, and he has shown the ability to go to the decision. But there's other fighters on the card that I look at, because when I started making my first lineup, I was having a little bit of trouble because I was like, man, what underdogs do I want to get to? I will say this. I don't know if I don't think it's a DFS play for me. But from a betting side, Kelvin Gastelum is someone that does intrigue me. He's fought in Mexico 2 times previously. I can very easily see Kelvin Gastelum losing round 1 and coming back and winning round 2 and round 3. There's other fighters that you just kind of have question mark. You look at Simon Oliveira, hasn't fought in 2 years. There's a article over at SureDog this week. I put the link to that in our Discord channel where Oliveira was talking about kind of everything that's happened with him over the last 2 years. Jamall Emmers, another guy we haven't seen in a long time, and you're going to have to pay a big price tag to get to him.
Yeah, I actually didn't read the article you posted. I meant to get around to it. So once we get to that fight, if you could expand upon what the article mentioned, that would be great. And I definitely think that throughout the card, you have some heavy favorites that if I told you this 6 months ago that they had these price tags, you would say, what the hell? Because they are somewhat untrustworthy. I mean, Rafa Garcia at a massive price tag doesn't make sense. I mean, he's minus 500. Yes, he's going up against an aged fighter, and he does have 12 years on Vinc Pichel, but still, minus 500 is such a ridiculous price tag for anybody in an MMA fight. And then you have Joe Pyfer, who had an issue with the step up in competition against Jack Hermanson, and with the fight being 5 rounds. This one's only 3 rounds, but now you're talking about crazy elevation for a guy that did look like he was KO or bust in most of his fights and was lucky enough to find a ton of KOs. You got Jamall Emmers, who it seems to have all the skill in the world, has good striking, good wrestling, solid grappling, but the fight IQ is abysmal. And sometimes he'll put himself into sketchy situations and poor circumstances because of his decisions, which could lead to a lower level opponent like a Gabriel Miranda latching up the neck and submitting him. You know what I mean? So there's some volatility, not to mention you have a very muscle-bound fighter in Gautier going up against, a punching bag in Medina, who's just too tough for his own damn good. But does Gautier, relatively inexperienced, does he cast out because he's so used to and accustomed to getting people out of there so early? So many different angles on this fight card, and that's what I think keeps pulling me back week in and week out. It's just the fascination of trying to solve the puzzle and trying to predict every way that these fight cards are going to go. Obviously, we float at a very high percentage of predictions, but we always strive to try to be perfect on the night, and it's a very, very tough task. But yes, it's been great lately, and I'm excited to break this down.
Yeah, I mean, one of the things I think you got to give a little props here to the UFC is no light heavyweights, no heavyweight fights on this fight card, because that's definitely something we would not want to see. But let's get right into breaking this one down here. Of course, the main event is a matchup between the former champion, Brandon Moreno, taking on the former title challenger in Steve Erceg. Steve Erceg is a 2-1 betting underdog, minus 245. For Brandon Moreno, $8,600 on DK, $18 on FanDuel. Erceg, $7,600 on DK, and $14 on FanDuel. You look at the UFC record of Steve Erceg, you see 3-2. He's lost his last two, but that first loss, he's literally 5 minutes away from becoming the UFC flyweight champion in that one. Of course, coming off that first round loss there against Kaikar France there back in August. Last time we saw Brandon Moreno's when he came out of retirement, where he got that decision win against Amir Albazi. And I was telling Pete this before the show, one of my concerns about Brandon Moreno is it just seems like this guy just gets off the slow starts, and he's battling his way to get back into the fight.
Yeah, and I also think that Brandon Moreno's previous performance, people could be overvaluing it a little bit when his previous performance was going up against the guy who was coming off a major layoff, major surgery, and was stepping back into the high title contention rankings facing Brandon Moreno. And it's just like, Amir Albazi he's an excellent fighter, but he looked like a shell of himself in that fight. In regards to Brandon Moreno and Steve Erceg, knee-jerk reaction initially, I was thinking I was going to go with the new blood in Steve Erceg, because Brandon Moreno's been around for so long. It's like he's redundant. He just not that he won't go away, but he's just a staple, and I don't want to call him a gatekeeper, but he's on that fringe top 3. Are you legit or not? And if you're not legit, he's going to beat you, or he's going to put a statement together. But I also think that he is very, very beatable. He's improved significantly from years past. He's already had his attempts against Alexandre Pantoja 3 times. And it's kind of like an uphill battle with, where's the end goal here? I mean, a 4th fight with Alexandre Pantoja? I don't really see that happening. So perhaps me wanting the new blood to win, to kind of have another matchup against Alexandre Pantoja, is why I was leaning towards Steve Erceg. But in this matchup, they're both pretty similar with their strikes attempted per round. Brandon Moreno definitely has the better defense. He's also not coming off of a devastating knockout from Kaikar France like Steve Erceg is. I think the wrestling factor is very, very interesting. They both have pretty poor takedown accuracy ratings of 46% for Moreno and 26% for Steve Erceg. In 5-round atmosphere, I think that we could see Erceg attempt like 7.5, 8 takedowns, Moreno attempting 6. And the volume in general might lean more towards Brandon Moreno. But I think it's going to be a competitive fight, Jason. I have a really hard time with this one, to be honest, because the stats are pretty similar. Based on my model, and it's been helping me out significantly. I've been floating around, I think, 80%, 75% on these past several weeks since I started implementing my model. It takes everything into consideration of fantasy points, the stats of attempted and landed, strength of schedule, their strength of wins, height advantage, reach advantage in their youth. And it comes out to very similar projections for these two. I mean, obviously we have Brandon Moreno facing the tougher strength of schedule, with his opponents having a win rate of 68%. And within his wins, this is where it looks a little bit better for Moreno over Steve Erceg. In his wins, he's beaten guys that have a 66% win rate. Steve Erceg's sitting at about 60%. So, it's a lean towards Brandon Moreno. I'm picking Brandon Moreno, and I think it's big fight experience, because in that Steve Erceg, Alexandre Pantoja, as you mentioned, he's moments away from possibly becoming champion, and a boneheaded decision of I think it was a takedown attempt, wasn't it? A takedown attempt led to a reversal, him being put on his back or put in a bad position, and let the fight kind of slip away from him. So big fight experience is something like you can't buy experience. And Moreno has all of it for this division. So, Steve Erceg, I think it'll be competitive. I think he's very good. I don't think he's going to get finished. The fight could possibly be stacked. I don't hate that call at all. It is 5 rounds and both pretty talented mixed martial artists. But I will be picking Brandon Moreno to beat Steve Erceg, and it's quite a surprise because I was initially picking Steve Erceg until I went into my data.
Yeah, I mean, I think a lot of people are going to be on the Brandon Moreno side of this equation. I mean, if the price point was a little bit better on DraftKings, I think I'd have a little bit more interest in Steve Erceg. But I do think that he's going to go out there and get the victory. Mentioned a couple questions coming in here in chat. First up from Joey, he goes, I like Erceg as a fighter, but I'm having a hard time finding a way he wins this fight unless Moreno has an off night like he did against Pantoja.
Yeah, I mean, I think the only thing, right, and I hate to kind of mention this now, I'm pretty sure Brandon Moreno is winless in Mexico. So, I mean, like, it's like his success rate in Mexico is not good at all. So, I mean, if you want to take that for what it is, you could also say, like, yeah, he may be winless, but he also has experience with altitude and elevation, which is another X factor. So there's so many intangibles and angles throughout this fight card. So I will be back in Brandon Moreno, especially if it's a competitive close fight in front of his hometown.
Next question was Moreno to finish this fight. Was Erceg going to do to Moreno?
I mean, I honestly think that he could outbox Brandon Moreno. I think he could. I mean, I think that Brandon Moreno's boxing's good. But sometimes, I don't know, Jason, doesn't it seem like he doesn't pull the trigger as much as I want him to? Like, there's so many fights, like, as you mentioned, where it's like, all right, man, like, get going. And, he does come through. I also think that he can dominate a lot of people within this division if he utilizes wrestling. Like that one fight against Davison Figueiredo when he really laced up those wrestling shoes. Like I was impressed. I said, man, now I can get behind this guy being the champ. Like this is awesome. But wrestling is tiring. So for people to want to go out there and fatigue themselves to push a crazy pace, I mean, you got to be in fantastic shape. So we'll have to see. I really would love to see these grappling situations.
Yeah, it's like me last week watching the Jan Blachowicz Carlos Ulberg fight as I have the prop fight doesn't go the distance. And I just going like, can either one of these dudes just throw something? I mean, I'm sitting on my couch. I'm yelling at the TV. No one else is in the room with me. I'm just yelling at the TV going, are we having a fight or are we having a staring contest?
Yeah. Hey, bro. I tell you, people get weirded out with Ulberg, man. You know, his range, the way he hits you with super weird angles, and that lead hand. It's a check hook technically, but it's a looping hook that catches a lot of people behind the ear. And then it was a calf kick battle between the two, and very patient approach. I mean, Jan Blachowicz, I don't even think he attempted takedowns in that fight, right? Like, I mean, and if he did, it was very minimal, and that was clearly the path to really solidify rounds or really test and see, is this guy just a kickboxer? So, yeah, I kind of thought it was going to be a lackadaisical performance because of the respect between the two. But I think that was a little bit more slow paced than I expected to.
Yeah, I was definitely expecting a little bit more action in terms of that one. Now, our co-main event this week is a matchup in the 155-pound division. We got Manuel Torres taking on Drew Dober. Dober, a minus 115 betting favorite, minus 105 for Torres. Torres, $8,200 DK, $16 on FanDuel. Dober, $8,000 on DK and $15 on FanDuel. Of course, Manuel Torres, 3-1 in the UFC. He is coming off a first-round TKO loss in his last matchup against Ignacio Bahamondes. His last 11 fights have ended in the first round. He's only made it out of the first round once in his career. That was back in 2018. That was a split decision win against Enrique Gonzalez. He will have a 3-inch reach advantage. Drew Dober, obviously a veteran of the UFC. I don't know how many people would necessarily believe this. You realize Drew Dober's 3 years older than Kelvin Gastelum?
I know, dude. That's what I'm telling you. I sat here and I went through this entire record. And, like, you know how long it took me to figure out what his opponent's records were? 693 wins, 393 losses. The guy's been around forever. And I expected him to be almost 40 years old.
Yeah, I mean, that was the one thing when I started doing research. I was like, Kelvin Gastelum's only 33 years old? Really? Wow, just shows you how young he was when he got in the UFC. Of course, this will be the 25th fight in the UFC for Drew Dober. He is coming off that third round TKO loss due to doctor stoppage against Gene Silva. Of course, a massive cut that he got early on in that fight ultimately stopped it in the third round. He has lost back-to-back fights, 1-3 in his last 4. And, look, there's sometimes, Pete, we can question why the UFC puts a fight in a certain spot on the card where you're like, why is it doing that? Very clearly, there's a reason this is a co-main event, because I think they know this has got violence written all over it.
Yeah, I mean, they know what they're doing here. And I love the fight, honestly. I do love the fight. Manuel Torres, El Loco, I mean, hometown guy, very violent finisher. I mean, like, some of the most violent finishes belong to Manuel Torres. I mean, the elbow that he hit Moda with, he knocked out Camacho. Chris Duncan just had a beautiful performance last week against Vucenic. And, Manuel Torres ragdolled him, put him to the mat. He's the striker, and he threw him to the mat and then ended up rear naked choking him. So, I mean, this guy, Manuel Torres, is so violent within the first 5 minutes. Outside the first 5 minutes, I mean, that's the thing that we don't know in this situation, right? Because in the UFC, how is he going to deal with Drew Dober, who's so tested, so talented in the striking department, lacking in the takedown defense department, but he's a dog. So, like, what happens if Torres gasses out? Because in multiple fights of Torres, I watch him, and it's just like his breathing in general, he looks labored. Very fast twitch type of guy. Let's hope that he learned something from going out there and trying to blitz everybody, because when he went out there and tried to blitz Ignacio Bahamondes, who's a more technical striker, a higher level striker, Bahamondes cracked him. And then when Manuel Torres got hurt, instead of taking a back step and changing up his strategy or being a little bit more careful, he kind of went back to being a little green in there with his aggression, and went in there and tried to just power through it and ended up getting knocked out brutally against Ignacio Bahamondes. So the fight IQ is a little suspect, if you want me to be honest, against, for Manuel Torres. And now we have later round question marks as well, because we know Drew Dober can go 15 minutes. I don't think that Drew Dober is a fantastic wrestler by any means. He trains at elevation, so clearly the longer this fight goes, the better chance for Drew Dober to come from behind and win this bout. And I actually think that Drew Dober is probably a fantastic live bet fighter on this card, because if he survives round 1, I'll be placing a wager on him, because Torres is way too untested outside of round 1. Especially in the UFC, and I know what Dober brings. Dober's very hittable, but he's tough, and sometimes he can take the shots pretty well. Gene Silva was able to bloody him up and get a doctor stoppage TKO. Matt Frivola was able to knock him down and finish him. So Dober isn't unbreakable, but his power himself and his technical skills kind of make people a little gun shy. And I wonder how this dynamic between Manuel Torres getting finished previously against Ignacio Bahamondes and now going up against a step up in competition, or I should say it's more of a lateral step. It's not like it's a step down. I was hoping it would be an easier matchup for him, but it's an equally difficult matchup against Drew Dober, especially if he has cardio issues in round 2 and round 3. So I like the fact that Drew Dober's still in the UFC and killing it and crushing it. They both have pretty equivalent strength of schedules. Yes, Dober has a massive record and a massive resume of who he's fought. Like I already mentioned, his opponent's 693 wins, 393 losses. That strength of schedule sits at 63% win rate. His opponent's win rate record, Manuel Torres, sits at 64. So even though he hasn't had the craziest amount of fights, he still has some good competition. And then within their wins, yeah, they fought good competition, but who have they beaten? Manuel Torres, as of late, his win strength, the people he's beaten, the win percentage sits at 64%, and Drew Dober sits at 59%. So what that tells you is that, Dober has fought tough competition, but within his wins, they aren't the strongest of competition. So, I like the length of Manuel Torres. He's younger, 6 years younger. A combination of 5 inches in height plus reach advantage. It's violent. I also think he has a grappling path to victory here. And I do like the fact that he has been out there training in Mexico for this bout for several weeks now. So, yes, Dober trains at elevation. They both should be in pretty damn good shape. But I like the overall skill set of Manuel Torres. So I'll be picking Manuel Torres here. And I highly recommend having one or the other a part of most of your lineups. This is a fight that you're going to need for GPPs galore.
Yeah, I mean, my one question about Manuel Torres is more of, hey, if you can't get that finish in the first round, what is round 2? What's potentially round 3? And if you look at the over 1.5 rounds, if your book does offer the over 1.5 rounds on a 3-round fight, Bet Rivers plus 143, FanDuel plus 142, Betway plus 140. And obviously, as we get closer to Saturday, more and more sportsbooks will offer up there. But yeah, I think in terms of GPP, I mean, if you tell me you got 20 lineups, I think you should have 10 lineups that have Torres, 10 lineups that have Drew Dober, because I think someone's definitely going to get finished in this one. Then we got a middleweight matchup. We got Kelvin Gastelum taking on Joe Pyfer. Joe Pyfer is a minus 310 betting fair, plus 245 for Gastelum, who's $6,900 on DK, $10 on FanDuel, Pyfer $9,300 on DK, and $22 on FanDuel. Of course, Kelvin Gastelum, so kind of crazy that he is only 33 years old, 13-9, won no contest in the UFC. He is coming off a decision win back in June there against Daniel Rodriguez. In his 22 fights in the UFC, 14 of them have gone the distance. Joe Pyfer, 4-1 in the UFC. He's coming off that first round TKO win back in June of last year against Marc-Andre Barriault. All of his UFC wins have come by stoppage, and he does have a 4-inch reach advantage. And, kind of one of my concerns with Joe Pyfer in this one, and I think this is kind of classic UFC matchmaking, the guy that, the vet that's been around against the up-and-coming guy, even though Kelvin Gastelum did say during his media appearance this week that he told the UFC, put me on the path to get a title shot. And hopefully someone in Kelvin Gastelum's camp maybe have more of a realistic conversation with him. But what does concern me about Joe Pyfer in this one is if he gets off to a hot start, maybe starts to fade away, and Kelvin Gastelum comes back, wins round 2, round 3, maybe not the greatest DraftKings score, but at $6,900, if he goes out there and gets you 75 points, that'd be a great number.
Yeah, I mean, I'm really, really interested with this matchup, and you bring in great points. I think that there are some delusional fighters out there, and a lot of people are delusional. I mean, I don't see Kelvin Gastelum fighting for a belt. I don't see him climbing the rankings. I do see him kind of being a gatekeeper of the top 10, though, of are you good enough to get past Kelvin Gastelum? And kind of similar to what Jack Hermanson did to Joe Pyfer. He wasn't ready for the step up of competition. Granted, that was 5 rounds. Joe Pyfer looked really, really good early. But Jack Hermanson danced around him, implemented some takedowns, out-volumed him, and Pyfer was tired. Pyfer was very, very fatigued, and the experience shone through in that matchup. Kelvin Gastelum here holds a pretty significant edge in competition. So if I go and I look at my model, the fantasy points and the expected fantasy points favor Joe Pyfer to come through. But if I look at strength of schedule, I mean, Joe Pyfer's opponent's total record is 169 wins and 114 losses, which is a win rate of 59%. Whereas Kelvin Gastelum, obviously, he has a crazy, crazy record and crazy resume. He has the second best strength of schedule on the entire slate. Kelvin Gastelum's opponent's win record, 490 wins and 207 defeats. So that's a win percentage of 70% for his opponents. So Kelvin Gastelum's literally just grown up in the UFC from, going on to the Ultimate Fighter, being the dark horse of the Ultimate Fighter, last pick of the Ultimate Fighter, goes in there, crazy underdog in the finale against Uriah Hall, comes through, just constantly counted out because of his weight, his height, his frame for the division. I mean, his best work is done at middleweight, despite us always thinking he's a true welterweight. He's an overblown welterweight. And honestly, he could probably be a lightweight if he ever took his diet completely serious, given his frame. But, I think welterweight was the max, and clearly we saw that was a significant struggle for him to even make it or maintain it, which is why he's fat and happy at 185 pounds. And honestly, he's had his best success at middleweight. So what are we talking about here? I mean, yes, he has been knocked down several times against Israel Adesanya in one of their best fights in history. Knocked down 4 times in that bout. He's been knocked down several other times, but he's never been knocked out. And yes, Joe Pyfer apparently broke Francis Ngannou's punch power record at the UFC PI. And he hits so damn hard, and when he hits people, they have a different look about him. And yeah, I get that, but I don't know, man. This is definitely a spot where are you really legit or not? I think that Joe Pyfer is truly the correct. He's in the correct weight class. He's a real middleweight, and when they size up, he's going to look significantly larger. But if you go back at KG's entire career, I mean, most of his career is the same exact circumstance. So, the model really likes Kelvin Gastelum here, and it's mainly because of the strength of schedule. I mean, it's within their wins, right? Within their wins, Joe Pyfer, his win strength sits at 56%. Win strength of Kelvin Gastelum sits at 67%. I just think the line's wide. I think the line's super, super wide. And when you talk about the potential fatigue, I mentioned it to you and I had a discussion with you. We have Joe Pyfer not really going out there getting acclimated to Mexico City at all. I mean, 10 days, he's out there 10 days prior to the fight. In my opinion, it's not enough time. Throughout his camp, he has been sleeping in a hyperbaric chamber for several months. So I did some research on a hyperbaric chamber, and 2 months in a hyperbaric chamber might give you a solid physiological base, but it's less specific to the real conditions and might not prepare you for the true for truly fighting at the altitude. Like Kelvin Gastelum has gone out and been out in Mexico for over a month now, and he's actually been living and training higher than where they're competing at. He's been in the mountains training. So acclimating a month before the fight is likely more beneficial than sleeping in a hyperbaric chamber. It's specific, practical, and aligns with how you will, likely adapt to that height. And I kind of like the fact that KG has experience fighting, in Mexico already. And you're talking about Mexico crowd. So, I mean, let me tell you this. I have my model developing projections, and I have Pyfer at like 199 score, and then I have KG at 201. So it's clearly a very, very close fight if it goes 15 minutes. And KG's never been knocked out. Yes, he could get submitted. He definitely could get submitted because his jiu-jitsu is lacking. And we saw KG struggle against Sean Brady in that department. Pyfer's clearly not the same technical wrestler or grappler of Sean Brady. But if it's a striking matchup or it's just a complete chaotic fight, I think I'm going to go with the value here and let Joe Pyfer kind of prove it to me. So give me Kelvin Gastelum here at 6,900.
Yeah, I mean, the one thing, and I mentioned about there's a couple of props that I do like on this fight card. One of those props I do like is Kelvin Gastelum wins via decision, plus 450, which I thought was a crazy number. I mean, if to me, if Gastelum's going to win this matchup, that's the way I see it happening. I don't know if it will be the greatest DraftKings score, but at 6,900, I really do like the value there. But also, you do want to see what ownership looks like. If you tell me Joe Pyfer is in that 25-ish% ownership range, then maybe it becomes a little bit interesting. I do concerned about the first round upside of Joe Pyfer, but if you tell me the same thing, I will say this: I'm sitting, I'm going out for a birthday party on Saturday, and if we get to the end of the first round, I'm hopping on that Hard Rock app and I'm seeing what Kelvin Gastelum is live after round one. Let's just say that. But I think pre-flop, I'll have a bet on Kelvin Gastelum wins via decision at plus 450.
Yeah, I probably will as well. I think that Pyfer could be the first guy to really knock out Kelvin Gastelum. He has that type of power. Um, if Kelvin Gastelum starts to wrestle, I think that there's an avenue for him to find some success or really just tax Joe Pyfer, which could deplete him a little bit over the course of 15 minutes. Um, you know, I'll probably be looking at, a half a unit on maybe KG, but I could also be looking at if Pyfer doesn't knock him out, and I'm kind of already eliminating that from likelihood. Gastelum plus 3.5, I think, is a very nice target for DraftKings Sportsbooks.
And if you're looking at Joe Pyfer to win via TKO KO plus 240, so not a bad number out there if that's the way you like for him to win that matchup. Next up, we got Raul Rosas Jr. taking on Vince Morales. Rosas Jr. is a minus 575 betting favorite, plus 385 for Morales. Morales, $7,000 on DK, $12 on FanDuel. Raul is $9,200 on DK. And $17 over there on FanDuel. Of course, the last time we saw Raul was back in September, getting his first UFC win via decision against Orichi Lang. Vince Morales, of course, came back to the UFC last year with that card there in France. He has dropped back-to-back fights, both via decision, 3-7 in the UFC. Of course, his last fight was 5 weeks ago, losing that decision there against Elijah Smith there. He will have a 3-inch reach advantage in this one. And to me, and I was telling Pete this a little bit earlier, my only concern about Raul is I think he can get the takedown. I think he can easily get it down, but my concern is if he doesn't get that stoppage in the first or second round.
Yeah, I definitely have concerns here. Raul Rosas Jr. is young, super talented in the takedown and grappling department. His striking is horrible. I know it's improving, but it's horrible in my eyes. I think that the strikes attempted per minute for Raul Rosas Jr. sits at about 3.5, whereas Morales sits at about 10.3. So if this fight stays on the feet and takedowns are not attempted, you could be looking at Morales really having his way here on the feet because he's fast. His hands are good. He digs to the body, and his combinations are awesome. The defense, striking defense from both of them is actually not horrible. It's the takedowns attempted and the takedowns landed for Raul Rosas Jr. I mean, his takedown accuracy sits at 39%, which equates to about 10 takedowns per 15 minutes that he's attempting. So he's attempting 10 takedowns in a 15-minute fight. That's bananas. And he'll probably end up landing 4 or 5 over the course of 15 minutes. His control time is pretty good. His jiu-jitsu is very, very savvy as well. He's not unbeatable, though. I definitely see holes where his confidence is a little too much and his faith and his heart, where I can see him getting put in some guillotines, or I can see him getting put in, Morales' Darce choke or his Peruvian necktie, and it could have been an avoidable situation, and we have Rosas Jr. trying to power through or trying to scramble through or not really respecting the attempts coming his way. Do I love Morales sitting there and playing jiu-jitsu back and forth with Rosas? No, because I think that Rosas will clearly outdog him and outmaneuver him. But, Rosas Jr., a guillotine, we see it all the time, like we saw Vucenic, right? Like, go in there, that Dunk just won via guillotine, and you go in there and you get caught with guillotine. I don't know how the hell that happens, but it did, and it could happen here for Rosas Jr. I mean, if this goes 15 minutes, I do think that Morales is a very, very good value here at 7,000. I think that he's a very good value. I'm not really all that sold on Morales going forward, but each matchup is specific. I don't like the fact that he did just lose to Elijah Smith. I picked Elijah Smith in that situation. And now you're going up against a better grappler. So I'm not in love with it at all. I'll be picking Raul Rosas Jr., but he's a young fighter, and we've seen him fatigue. We know what happens if he's stuck on the feet. I think that he'll attempt as many takedowns as necessary to get it where he's comfortable. I do expect him to edge out Vince Morales, but it's nothing that I'm really, really like saying Rosas Jr. is going to submit him in round one. Could happen, but I think that Morales is a little bit disrespected each and every time he fights. But Rosas Jr. should go in there and get another victory here. So I'll be picking Rosas Jr. to get it done at 9.2 thousand.
Yeah, I mean, I think he gets the job done here as well. Kind of crazy that when I was looking at the props earlier, right before the show, Raul via submission plus 225, which is, I was not expecting that number. I thought it would have been a lower number than plus 225. I do like him here. Vinc has always been a durable guy in the UFC. And, look, and the fight was kind of turning his way there 5 weeks ago against Smith. So, but to me, I just don't think he can stop the takedown. I think the submission comes and Raul gets the job done there. Next up, we got David Martinez taking on Saimon Oliveira, who is a plus 300 betting underdog minus 400 for David Martinez. Martinez, 9,400 on DK, $20 on FanDuel. Oliveira, 6,800 on DK, and $9 on FanDuel. Of course, this is the UFC debut for David Martinez. He did get that win back on the Contender Series, a decision win back in October. Currently riding a 7-fight winning streak. 6 of those have come in Combate Global, which finally is doing shows. Not a lot of fighters probably want to fight for Combate Global right now just because of things, how they've unfolded over the past couple weeks, past couple months here. By the way, Martinez, 9 of his 11 wins have come by TKO KO, 0 submission wins. On the other side, Oliveira 0-2 in the UFC. He's coming off a second-round TKO loss against Daniel Marcos. That was back in January of 2023, so 2 years, 2 months since we have last seen him. He will have a 6-inch reach advantage in this matchup. And I put this article over in our Discord channel from Sherdog, which was a long road back for Saimon Oliveira. And this was his quote. He goes, quote, "A little over a month before that bout, I had a training accident. I took a spinning kick to the stomach. It caused a serious injury that forced me to drop out. I had to undergo emergency surgery for an intestinal rupture. It was a shock to the system since my career had been going so well to that point. Had I not arrived at the hospital fast enough, I could have possibly died. It was traumatic. I had to remain in the hospital for 11 days. After that, I wasn't able to train for another 6 months. It was bad for me. I was used to regular intensive training sessions." It goes on to say, I started dealing with anxiety and depression. It was a terrible period. I was afraid I would never get back to the same level. I've always been an aggressive fighter who always moved forward due to my Muay Thai background. I love to bang it out. The abdominal injury made me hold back. When I returned to training, I noticed that I wasn't as aggressive. I was stuck. I was leery of certain strikes. The fear of being re-injured led to anxiety episodes. Goes on to say, talking about that matchup against Daniel Marcos, he said, I wasn't well on that day, but there are no excuses when you lose. My manager asked the UFC to give me extra time to train and work on my mindset. That's why I didn't fight for 2 years. During these 2 years, I trained extremely hard and did amazing work with my doctor and psychologist. My mind is ironclad now, Pete."
Bro, I feel fucked up laughing, man. I'm sorry, Jason. I'm so sorry for laughing. But me as a coach, what are we gonna do? The first thing we're gonna hit him with a spinning back kick to the body, and he's going up against a crazy kicker. Oh God, I was trying not to laugh through that because it's just like, he's telling his story, and I'm happy that he's okay now. The anxiety and depression thing, that's sad. The details of the spinning back kick to the body, I don't know if I would have gone through that and explained that because I don't know if I'm a dick or not, but he's going up against Martinez, who has phenomenal kicks. I'm willing to bet Martinez is going to hit him with a spinning back kick to the body, and it's going to be a nightmare. I'm just talking strategy. I mean, I really think that I would go right to the body, and I know that sounds so messed up. But in this game where that there is injuries, it's not like he's kicking him in the knee. He hit him with a body shot. And I think that's kind of putting a bullseye right there, man. Honestly, as a coach and as a fighter, I hear that. And I was trying to keep a straight face because I couldn't keep my composure because I'm just thinking of how we would target that in camp. I already thought of 3 or 4 different combinations of what we're going to do. So Martinez is a really dynamic kicker. Going up against Saimon Oliveira, I wish him well. I'm happy about the depression and the anxiety improvements. Happy that he's getting back to fighting. But I almost feel like the UFC knew what they were doing by putting him against Martinez, who's a crazy kicker, when he had a horrible training accident via kick. So, yeah, I mean, Martinez is relatively unproven inside the UFC. I mean, he's making his UFC debut. His record, his total opponent record sits at 96 wins and 53 defeats. Strength of schedule of 64%. Um, the win rate for Simon Oliveira, a lot of low level opponents. I mean, within Simon Oliveira's wins, 127 wins, 103 defeats. The people he's beaten have a win record of 55% compared to Martinez's 63%. So I really think that the absence in the cage, the lack of time of being acclimated, the momentum, there could be all these outside factors for him to come in here and blow the doors off of a Dana White's Contender Series fighter. But I think that Martinez is going to kick the shit out of him. And I think that we're going to have Martinez via KO, TKO due to a body shot. So I think the price tag's pretty high, pretty rich. But yeah, I'm picking Martinez to win the fight.
Yeah, I do like the prop of Martinez wins by TKO KO plus 140. That is a line that I definitely saw there. And, look, I would imagine that, Oliveira, if he gets a loss here, his days in the UFC will be over. Next up, we got Ronaldo Rodriguez taking on Kelvin Borjas. Borjas a plus 125, betting underdog minus 150 for Rodriguez, who's 8,500 on DraftKings, $16 on FanDuel. Kelvin Borjas, 7,700 on DK. And $15 on FanDuel. Tale of two fighters in terms of their UFC journey to this point. Rodriguez 2-0 in the UFC, coming off a decision win against Ode Osborne back in September. He's won 7 straight since losing on the Contender Series back in 2020. Kelvin Borjas 0-2 in the UFC, coming off a second-round TKO loss against Costa. Prior to his appearance on Dana White Contender Series, he had never gone the distance, and he will have a 3-inch reach advantage in this one, Pete.
Yeah, I mean, lazy boy Ronaldo Rodriguez, a guy I have not been high on at all. When I saw he lost to Jerome Rivera, I kind of was out on him, and I think I am out on the guy. I mean, like, I picked who the hell did I pick in his last opponent, Ode Osborne, who dropped him and had him really out, and any other referee could have stepped in and stopped the fight. Ultimately, they let it go on. He came back. He ended up beating Ode Osborne, but I thought I was going to look really smart in that fight, and it was mainly just fading Lazy Boy, and it happened to be by backing Ode Osborne, which I don't love, but I'm just not. I look at this guy; he's 17-2. I don't see him as a 17-2 fighter. I really don't, Jason. So I had to dive deep into his record, and surprising. It's an okay record. I thought it was going to be a lot worse. I thought it was going to be a lot of low-level opposition. The total guys that he's fought, 149 wins, 108 losses, which is a win rate of 57%. Within his wins, 130 wins, 98 losses, 57%. So, no, he's beaten the people that he should beat and pretty similar. His opponent, Kelvin Borjas, is a very dangerous striker. And I think this is the difference between the two is I'm not in love with Lazy Boy striking at all. Like, I don't think that he's good on the feet. I think he's hittable. I think he's a hype machine. For whatever reason, he's very good on the mic. He's very good with social media. He gets a ton of people behind him. The UFC is hoping that he gets another victory because he's an exciting fighter that a lot of the Mexican people like to get behind. And he's funny. But I think the UFC can try to have certain things bounce the correct way. But I think that other fighters have different plans. And in a situation here with a slight height plus reach advantage for Kelvin Borjas, more volume. I mean, if we're looking at the statistics for Lazy Boy, he's throwing about 4.8 strikes per minute, whereas Borjas is throwing 12.3. Obviously the difference maker will be Lazy Boy's takedowns to really go in there and attempt takedowns and pin Borjas down on the cage. But that's every Borjas fight. Everybody's trying to do that to Borjas because the hands are nice. I mean, this guy broke through as an underdog on the Contender Series, the combinations and the speed. The fantasy points side with Kelvin Borjas. The strength of schedule sides with Kelvin Borjas. Obviously within the wins, though, if I look back at the win strength is not the greatest for Kelvin Borjas. but the strength of schedule is equivalent or even better than Lazy Boy. So with all that being said, I'm going to go with the underdog because I do have it as a closer fight than what the odds suggest. I'm just not getting behind Lazy Boy. I mean, yes, he could submit Borjas. I think that on the feet, Borjas can go in there and really let his hands fly. Got to be super careful about getting calf kick galore as he has in the past. Um, but yeah, I'm gonna go with an underdog here in Borjas. I just think that the price tag makes a little bit more sense at 7,700. And I think he's a dog, and I think he's completely counted out against the guy that I'm not sold on. So give me Borjas.
Yeah, this just kind of seems like, for Borjas, is if you don't get the win here, his time in the UFC will likely be over in that situation. Not many fighters survive starting off 0-3 in the UFC. Next up, we got Chairez taking on Vergara. Vergara plus 210 betting underdog. Minus 260 for Edgar Chairez, who's 9,000 on DK, $16 on FanDuel. CJ Vergara, 7,200 on DK, and $12 on FanDuel. Chairez is 1-2 with one no contest in the UFC. He is coming off a decision loss against Joshua Van there back in September. He does have a 3-inch reach advantage in this one. For CJ Vergara, he's 3-4 in the UFC. He is coming off a first-round TKO loss against Timarov back in October, and he has lost back-to-back fight speed.
Yeah, so I mean, this fight between Edgar Chairez and CJ Vergara is a very, very exciting one. And I was so shocked with the line. I got to tell you, because I do not look at Chairez and say that he should be this big of a favorite over many people, because he's a submission guy that doesn't attempt takedowns. I mean, he's a guy that defensively attempts submissions. He's an opportunistic submission guy. And I think that his submission game is probably his best asset. I think his hands are good. I think he's a violent, mean guy. But I think that he's not super technical. I mean, on the feet, he's throwing about 7.5 strikes per minute. Vergara is a little bit higher with a little bit better volume, a little bit better accuracy at about 9 strikes per minute. Because neither one of these guys attempted takedowns, we don't really have to even worry about it. You have CJ Vergara with clearly he's had the tougher strength of schedule within his opponent's record, 177 wins, 84 defeats. His strength of schedule sits at 67% win rate. And within their wins, you have Chairez at 54% and Vergara at 58%. And I think that if you look at Vergara, he's usually struggling because he's facing off against dynamic wrestlers or power punchers that can wrestle. So he's getting hit with shots that he normally wouldn't because he's worried about the takedown. I think Vergara is strong. I mean, I think Vergara is fast enough to deal with some of these guys that are stronger than him. I think that he can maneuver and kind of outpoint these guys. And that's kind of my expectation here, is that this is a very, very close fight. One that is so close that my model has Chairez scored at 188 and Vergara scoring at 187. So, I mean, for Chairez to be 9,000, to be almost, minus 200 favorite, minus 250 favorite over Vergara, who is 7,200, I just think it's a little wide. And honestly, I think that Vergara's toughness is pretty damn good. I also think that we could see just, Vergara come on late while Chairez starts to slow down. Chairez super, super dangerous. But like I said, his best skill set is in the grappling, and I can't trust him to land some takedowns or even attempt takedowns because we haven't seen it in the UFC. He's usually on the receiving end of it. So yeah, I have this where technically I have Chairez winning, but that's not how I would bet it. I definitely wouldn't be laying juice on Chairez when I think it's going to be a competitive fight. I would probably be looking at maybe the split decision props, maybe the CJ Vergara plus 3.5. I think that's a different angle to kind of start to implement, because if this goes 15 minutes, I think Vergara can win a round. I actually think that he can win the fight. So, I mean, everybody's kind of off the CJ Vergara train, and, is he great? No, but I actually think that he can win some fights, and Chairez is a guy that I don't think is all that spectacular. So I will be picking Chairez, but I think it's like a split decision win. I think it's a very narrow victory, which Vergara makes it close. Vergara in a loss scores decently well, or Vergara could possibly steal the decision. So the value's all on Vergara, and there's no way that I'd be laying 9,000 or, minus 250, minus 300 on Edgar Chairez.
Yeah, I feel like Vergara is going to be one of the more popular underdogs on this card that people are going to go to, looking at the value of him there at $7,212 there over on FanDuel. Next up, we got a middleweight matchup. Medina taking on Gautier. Gautier minus 450 betting favorites, plus 340 for Medina, who's $6,600 on DK, $8 on FanDuel. Gautier $9,600 on DK and $21 on FanDuel. Of course, Medina did lose his UFC debut back in August of last year via decision against Zach Reese. He has lost back-to-back fights via decision. 10 of his 11 wins have come via stoppage. Of course, on the other side, you got the UFC debut here for Gautier. Last fight was on Dana White's Contender Series back in September, a second-round TKO win. But Pete, the one thing that really did stick out to me when I was doing my research is not great strength of schedule prior to Dana White's Contender Series.
Yeah, I mean, absolutely horrendous, actually. I mean, he's the worst on the entire slate, and I didn't even notice that until you just mentioned it. So let's break it down. You guys know I like to break it down with the data now, and I think it kind of gives some background as to what these guys are fighting, who they're fighting. Are they getting kind of just like catapulted to the top when they haven't really earned it? Gautier definitely hits like an absolute truck. I mean, the knockout power that this guy possesses is crazy. And for a guy in Medina who's so damn durable and his chin has checked out in every single one, he hasn't faced a guy that's a power puncher like Gautier. So I think that Gautier could be that first guy to really crack that chin and get him out of there. But now let's dive deeper because, the fantasy points clearly favor Gautier here. Granted, it's only one Contender Series fight, but I haven't liked what I've seen from Medina from an output standpoint. I mean, he, according to the stats, he's only attempting 5 strikes, per minute. He's attempting 1.5 takedowns per 15 minutes. His accuracy and success rate with everything is horrible. And now we dive into the strength of schedule for Gautier, Jason. Listen to the strength of schedule. His opponent's records, 29 wins, 49 defeats. His strength of schedule win rate sits at a card worst 37%. That is horrible. And his strength of his wins sits at 36%. So it's even worse. But now we have Medina, where Medina, I go and I dive through his record. A lot of low-level guys as well. 118 wins, 118 losses, sits at 50%. You dive and you look at the strength of his wins because, he's fought good, better competition, but has he beaten anybody of note? His win strength sits at 41% compared to Gautier's 36%. So both these guys are so low level. I honestly think what I would do, Jason, Gautier, I think the most likely situation is that he knocks out Medina and is one of the few or the only person to do it. I think I honestly would look at the overs in this situation because I think they're both going to be – I think Gautier is going to be gassed. I think Medina is going to be in better shape, but he just doesn't do anything. Like I think that he could possibly look to take him down, but his submission game is lacking. His power sucks. So I think there's no way he comes from behind and finishes him because I think Gautier's got 7.5 minutes in him. So I honestly would start looking at some of these crazy props, and I'm pulling them up right now. Like Medina to win via submission, I guess it's not even that crazy. Gautier to win the decision, plus 275. Because I'm seeing a low-volume, lackadaisical fight where Gautier's scared to get tired, but he does enough to win. So, I mean, I think I'd honestly be looking at Gautier to win via decision at plus 275. That number is terrible compared to what I thought it was going to be. I thought it was going to be like plus 500. On the other side, you got Medina at plus 650, but I'm not going to roster Medina, man. I'm just not. He's a punt. He could come from behind. He could possibly survive a storm and be the guy in a loss that does enough, or be the guy that, somehow gets the nod with the judges from activity. But I just don't see it. So I'll be picking Gautier to still pick up a victory here.
Yeah, I like Gautier, and the over 1.5 rounds is not a good number. It's like minus 175. So,
Bro,
kinda,
that's what I'm saying. I'm
yeah.
kind of shocked. It's almost like they know they're gonna gas.
Yeah, but clearly is he's got the look. Let's just say that he's got the look of that the UFC likes there, and I expect him to be a very popular play there. Next up, we got Rodriguez taking on Costa. Rodriguez a minus 170 betting fair, plus 144 Costa, who's 7,800 DK, $15 on FanDuel. Christian Rodriguez 8,400 DK, $16 on FanDuel. I mean, we should just change this guy's nickname to the Prospect Killer when you talk about who he's beaten the past year or so. Austin Bashi, Isaac Dolgarian, and also Raul Rosas Jr. Of course, most recent win coming back in January, that decision win there against Austin Bashi. He's 5-2 in the UFC. His last 4 wins in the UFC have come via decision. On the other side, Costa 3-2 in the UFC. He's won back-to-back fights via submission. Most recently, a first-round submission back in February against Andre Fili.
Yeah, it's kind of silly that, like, with Christian Rodriguez, I have to look at who he's fighting in order to determine how he's going to perform, right? I mean, like, are you a prospect? Because if you're a prospect, I'm not picking you. I'm picking C-Rod. And if you are a veteran or just a normal guy, I might be a little bit more interested in you than normal. So it's so weird, right? Like, I can't get a real read on Christian Rodriguez. He's come through for us a ton of times because for whatever reason, he's constantly overlooked and undervalued. He's very talented in all areas. Solid striker, solid wrestler, solid jiu-jitsu. Tends to get taken down a little bit too much for my liking and a little too complacent. Yes, he's a relaxed athlete, but I do think that he's a little complacent at times. If you look at the metrics and the strikes attempted, it's a slight lean towards Melquizael Costa as far as the output's considered. The takedown department, the guy that should be attempting takedowns will be Melquizael Costa. I mean, he should be looking to attempt about 7 takedowns per 15 minutes. But he has to be wise of the guillotine and of the chokes of Christian Rodriguez. I think they both kind of nullify each other's strengths here, which is giving me a very, very difficult read on this fight, and it's a little bit of a weird vibe. I don't know who I really want to pick in this matchup. I mean, you got a slight strength of schedule advantage for Melquizael Costa, sitting at 63%, whereas C-Rod's at 60%. But I think I might honestly favor the guy that's attempting more takedowns here, but I don't like the fight. I really do not like the fight from a DFS aspect. I could be dead wrong on this one. It's probably my least favorite fight, my least confident read on the entire card, because I'm not a believer in Melquizael Costa, but I can't deny the data that's sitting in front of me right here. So I got to go with the data, man. And the data likes Melquizael Costa to edge out Christian Rodriguez. So I'll be picking Melquizael Costa. But, man, I think that I'd rather prefer some other fights because I don't think that this is going to be a do-or-die type of fight. I think it'll be a methodical 15-minute fight where they take their time. They may have an opportunity to finish, but I think more than likely this is one where it's just a competitive back and forth.
Yeah, I get you in terms of that. Christian Rodriguez, I could be, and you, perfectly. If you thought Costa was a prospect, you're probably just saying, let me just roster Christian Rodriguez because these are the fights he does typically win there. Next up, we got a female matchup. Godinez taking on Polastri. Polastri at plus 225 betting underdog, minus 275 for Loopy, who's 800 on DK, $16 on FanDuel. Julia, 7,400 on DK. And $13 on FanDuel. Loopy Godinez, 7-5 in the UFC. 10 of her 12 fights in the promotions have gone the distance. By the way, she does have 2 wins via submission. She's lost back-to-back fights against Virginia Roba and Mackenzie Dern. The most recent loss came back in August there against Dern. On the other side, Julia 1-1 in the UFC. Both of her fights in the UFC have gone the distance, and she is coming off a split decision win back in October against Corey McKenna.
Yeah, very weird fight, right? Because I don't know what Loopy Godinez is in 2025. I mean, man, we all remember her incredible performance going out there, ragdolling her opponent in Ariana Carnelossi. And it was when she was showcasing both her striking and her wrestling and kind of mixing it up, whereas like she was GSPing Ariana Carnelossi. She just did whatever the hell she wanted to her. And then for whatever reason, whether it's gas tank, whether it's injuries, whether it's fight IQ, fight preparation, strategy with the team, I don't know what the hell it is, but she strayed away from her wrestling a little too much for my liking. I think the girl's a dominant wrestler. She can be so damn good if she really just laced up those wrestling shoes every fight and wasn't inconsistent with it. You got Loopy Godinez. She has fought some tough competition, and it's a slight edge in the strength of schedule for Loopy Godinez, but the win strength is a little bit better. It's about a 4% advantage for Loopy Godinez in this situation. The fantasy points is very, very close between the two. The striking volume of Polastri is better than Loopy Godinez, but the takedown attempts for Loopy Godinez, if she laces up the wrestling shoes, I think it could keep Polastri busy enough and defensive enough to kind of negate some of her output. So, man, it's a super, super close fight. I have the Pyfer and Gastelum fight lined very close if it goes 15 minutes. I have the Chairez and Vergara fight lined very, very close if it goes 15 minutes. And this fight's most likely going 15 minutes, and I think it's really close as well. I know a lot of smart people are going to be on Polastri this week, and I don't blame them or fault them at all because she's a very good kickboxer. She's talented. Not only that, she has picked up some submission wins in the past as well when she's able to get the back and get a rear naked choke. Oh, man, I mean, I think that you could do worse than Polastri. She's probably in the good value consideration, just like a CJ Vergara, where like the likelihood of them getting finished is low and the likelihood of them going 15 minutes is high, and they could actually do enough to win the fight or steal a decision. I still have Godinez winning the fight narrowly, though. Like narrow. So I think from a betting perspective, what I would do similar to the Chairez and Vergara fight is I'd be looking at the split decision props or Julia Polastri plus 3.5, because I don't think it's going to be a wipeout one way or another. But I think plus 3.5 for Polastri kind of helps you out a little bit, and I think the public are starting to see that too. So I'll be picking Godinez, but I will be targeting Polastri plus 3.5.
Yeah, I mean, the history would tell you this thing is likely going to go 15 minutes when you look at the history of both of these fighters. Then we got a matchup between Rafa Garcia and Vinc Pichel. Rafa Garcia minus 525, betting fair plus 360 for Pichel, who's 6,700 DK, $10 on FanDuel. Garcia, 9,500 on DK. And $23 on FanDuel. Rafa Garcia is 4-4 in the UFC. 6 of those 8 UFC fights have gone the distance. He is coming off a second-round TKO loss there against Grant Dawson back in October. Was initially booked on this card against Joaquim Silva. And prior to that Dawson fight, he had gone the distance in 3 straight fights. Vinc Pichel, veteran of the UFC. It's kind of crazy. He's only had 11 fights in the UFC, 7-4 in the UFC. He is coming off a decision loss back in May of last year against Ismail Bonfim. The fight against Bonfim was his first fight in nearly 2 years, and he has lost back-to-back fights, Pete.
Yeah, so weird fight, right? Like, Vinc Pichel, a guy that's been around for a while, but hasn't had that much UFC experience. I mean, I kind of expected it to be a lot more. As you mentioned, Rafa Garcia is sitting here as a massive minus 500 favorite. Initially, it was like, what the hell is this? I mean, it don't make much sense to me at all. But then I start to look at it and I go, okay, well, we have we have Rafa Garcia, the 12 years younger, has 1 inch in height plus reach advantage. But it's the takedown defense of Vinc Pichel is abysmal, is horrible. And going up against, was it last week or the week before when I had Alexander Hernandez against Kurt Hollabaugh, I really bought into the takedown defense of Kurt Hollabaugh being the same as it always been, because he's a little too content, or if he gets taken down, he just likes to work back to his feet. I mean, that's what Vinc Pichel does. Like, Vinc Pichel gets taken down and he likes to work back to his feet, but he'll accept the takedown. So, plus, 25% takedown defense is horrible. 25% takedown defense is awful. And I do think that we've seen Rafa Garcia lace up the wrestling shoes in the past, The striking volume favors Rafa Garcia of 9 strikes per minute versus 7 for Vinc Pichel. But it's the takedown attempts for Rafa Garcia, where Rafa Garcia will be attempting about 7 to 8 takedowns in this fight. And against Vinc Pichel's 25% takedown defense rating, he should be getting 5 of them. And within those 5 takedowns, there should be tons of control. And I actually think that there's a potential chance for a finish because of the elevation. But the most likely situation is that Rafa Garcia just implements absolute dominance within this fight because of his youth, his athleticism, and the clear advantage in the wrestling department. I mean, Vinc Pichel will attempt takedowns in most fights too, but he's going up against Rafa Garcia's 75% takedown defense. So I think we'll get one takedown, and then he'll realize, yeah, that was a mistake, and he's kind of in Rafa Garcia's, his home, where he's just going to reverse position and start to get takedowns. I mean, if Rafa sits there and boxes with him, he's an idiot. And it's nothing that I would love to have when I'm backing a guy that's minus 500. I mean, this slight strength of schedule advantage for Rafa Garcia, but it's the strength of the wins that's pretty significant in comparison to other fights, where it's a 6% advantage in the strength of wins for Rafa Garcia. So, I mean, I know most people probably will be avoiding Rafa Garcia at this heavy price tag, but I like having known wins in my lineup. I don't think that there's more than a 10 to 15% chance that Vinc Pichel comes through here. So, I will be going with Rafa Garcia. He may score terribly. He may get about 90 points, but I actually think that there's some significant room for upside here, given the horrible takedown defense of Vinc Pichel. So give me Rafa Garcia, and I'll be backing him similar to how I backed Carly Judice the previous weeks, and other massive favorites that not too many people wanted to get behind. I mean, I get it. The price tag's it's not a lovely thing. I was hoping for it to be cheaper, but 9,500, I think it's clearly his fight to lose. So give me Rafa Garcia to dominate.
Yeah, I mean, to me, and once again, and I talk about this game theory every week I hear it on this podcast, is simply of who can you find that is that high 9,000 option that people are not getting to. Maybe this week it is going to be Rafa Garcia. Next up, we got Jamall Emmers taking on Gabriel Miranda. Jamall Emmers is a minus 425 betting favorite, plus 315 for Miranda, who's 7,100 on DK, $11 on FanDuel. Emmers, 9,100 DK, and $19 on FanDuel. Jamall Emmers is 3-4 in the UFC. The last time we saw him was in March of last year. That was a first-round TKO loss there against Nate Landwehr. He has alternating wins and losses in the UFC. On the other side, Miranda, 1-2 in the UFC, coming off that second-round TKO loss against Morgan Chairez. And 16 of his 17 wins have come via submission.
Yeah, so, I mean, we kind of touched on this, right? What could go wrong parlays of, rostering these massive favorites, a part of a parlay or a part of your DFS lineup. And it's all right, well, who's going to shit the bed here? And who's going to have a hard time in elevation? Or who's going to have the worst fight IQ on the entire card? Emmers might be on the list here of fighters with the worst fight IQ. I mean, I got to tell you, the guy's got all the skills in the world, very good hands, pretty good wrestling. Submission defense is probably his weakest point, right? Especially just knowledge of what's going on in the submission department. His chin has been cracked lately, and it's definitely a vulnerability. But I really do think that Emmers, pound for pound, skill for skill on this card, he might be one of the most skilled guys next to the guys in the main event. He's very, very talented. He's very good. I just can't tell you what decisions certain fighters are going to make. And the second a guy in my DFS lineup makes a horrible decision and I got a losing fighter, I pivot directly to betting. It is what it is from a single entry approach. I'm hoping to have 6 perfect fighters, but if I have one guy that loses, I'm hoping to now just pivot to betting and start to become a little bit more profitable in that. And back-to-back weeks, I've had 2 losing fighters in each of my lineups, and they've cashed week after week. So, it's it's all about the exposure and the correct fights that you target. So, on the feet, I think that Jamall Emmers will have his way with Miranda as long as it's on the feet. I mean, Miranda's striking defense sits at 37%. Horrible. Emmers attempts 11 strikes per minute, whereas Miranda attempts 7. So clearly absolute annihilation in the striking department. The takedowns attempted, like Emmers typically attempts takedowns. He typically attempts 4 per fight. I don't love it, especially in this matchup, because Gabriel Miranda, man, he'll shoot like crazy, but his jiu-jitsu type of takedowns, very, very low percentage, 33% success rate, which means he's attempting about 11 takedowns per 15 minutes. Having success with about 3.85 per 15 minutes. But he's going up against Jamall Emmers, who has takedown defense of 90%. So it's like, I think that Emmers will defend the takedowns, punish Miranda while he's going for them. I hope that Emmers doesn't reverse position and initiate his own takedown, because that's when you fall into the trap of possibly getting guillotined against Miranda, or getting armbarred or leg locked or triangled or whatever. And you're just putting the jiu-jitsu guy back to where he's most comfortable. And the takedown defense of Miranda is non-existent because he welcomes it. Altogether, Miranda has the worst total defense on the entire card, combining striking defense and takedown defense. Normally you should be trying to have 100% on both of them. Miranda's combined is at 37%, Jason. So, I mean, this should be Emmers all day long if he doesn't screw up and make a horrible decision. I mean, the strength of schedule for Emmers sits at 60%, whereas Miranda sits at 52%. But it's the strength of the wins that means the most to me. And it's probably, I think it's the biggest difference on this entire card. Yes, it is. Whereas Emmers' strength of his wins, the people he's beaten have a win record of 59%, whereas the people that Miranda has beaten has a win rate of 40%, where his guys that he's beaten has a record of 69 wins and 100 losses. So, yeah, give me Emmers here. I like Rafa Garcia number 1. I like Emmers number 2. I'll close my eyes and hope that he doesn't make an idiotic mistake. But I think that Emmers smashes here. But if I am going to bet or I am going to hedge, the only way I'm hedging is with Miranda via submission, because that's his only path to victory, in my opinion.
Yeah, I do like Emmers here, but the layoff is obviously a little bit of a concern there for me. Now, opening fight tonight, we got Marco Medeiros taking on Austin Hubbard. Hubbard plus 140 betting underdog, Medeiros minus 170. He's $87 on DK, $16 on FanDuel. Hubbard, $7,500 on DK and $13 on FanDuel. Medeiros won his UFC debut back in February of last year. At that time, he was training at Factory X in Colorado. He's now at the lab in Arizona. He's had 2 canceled fights since that UFC debut. 6 of his 9 wins have come by TKO, KO. You look at the other side, Hubbard, 4-6 in the UFC, coming off a split decision loss against Alexander Hernandez back in October, and 7 of his 10 UFC fights have gone the distance.
Yeah, I think this is an interesting fight, right? Like, Medeiros is a guy who looked good on the Contender Series, fought Landon Quinones, in his UFC debut. And now he's sitting at a sizable favorite over Austin Hubbard, who is a guy that everybody counts out, right? And everybody watches him fight and they say, man, this guy ain't no good. He's just a generalist. His boxing's okay. His wrestling's okay. His fight IQ, his endurance, everything's just okay. And if you really, can push Hubbard, you can get him out of there, especially in the submission department. If you're a good wrestler, you can really put Hubbard in some compromising situations. I do think that Hubbard's really, really tough. And the one change that I do like is that Hubbard, recently he did change from Team Elevation to Valley Flow Striking, my buddy's gym, Mike Valley's gym, VFS. But he didn't really have a true camp to acclimate. So when Hubbard didn't pick up a victory in his first fight camp with VFS, I think that people could be viewing it as a mistake, but he fought Alexander Hernandez and it was a split decision. Now I think that they've had all the time in the world to prepare with a full camp. He's been staying ready and getting ready, waiting for an opportunity, steps in, trying to fight Daniel Zellhuber. Zellhuber falls out. Hubbard remains on the card. They find Medeiros, who says, I'll fight anybody. And now Medeiros comes in here as the favorite, as a guy who just left Factory X not too long ago, or maybe like 6 months ago, but has been on the shelf for a little bit and has been at the MMA lab now. So I dove into their records a little bit, and given the 2 fights that Medeiros has had, the stats are pretty similar to Hubbard. So the strikes attempted for both of them sit at about 9.5. Hubbard does attempt takedowns, whereas we haven't seen that part of Medeiros' game. Hubbard does attempt about 4.5 per 15 minutes. But if I look at the strength of schedule, like Medeiros hasn't really been tested. I mean, his opponent's total wins is 62, opponent's total loss is 60. So his opponent's strength of schedule is 50% win rate, whereas Hubbard's opponent's 285 wins, 156 losses, sits at 64%. That's a difference of 14%. I mean, it goes to show you that Hubbard's fought tougher competition, but not only that, the strength of the wins, there's about 10%, 9% between Hubbard and Medeiros. So Hubbard's definitely the more tested and tested guy within the UFC, and he's seen people like Medeiros all the time. I don't think Medeiros is knocking him out. And now I heard somebody in chat, or you mentioned it, that Medeiros just showed up like this week or today or the other day to Mexico City. He could be in fantastic shape, but I'll tell you what, my buddy Mike Valley will have Hubbard prepared for the elevation. So VFS, Austin Hubbard picks up a victory here, and that's another underdog I'll be backing this week, man. I'm backing a ton of underdogs this week. So Austin Hubbard to kick off the card as an underdog coming through with a decision.
Yeah, one of the really interesting stories when you talk about the MMA gym business is the mass exit out of Factory X over the last 6 months. It has been very fascinating to see how many fighters have left that gym. Kind of makes you wonder what's going on inside that gym.
Well, I mean, that's Montoya's gym, right?
Yeah.
Didn't Montoya just get sick with cancer, or he's been battling cancer or something crazy like that? And maybe the guy had to step away from the gym as crazy and as serious to handle some health stuff. I mean, man, but fighters are very selfish people to begin with. And it could have been something within the gym. It also could be one bad apple spoils the bunch, and now you got guys trying to pull people away from the gym, or a certain situation happens. But I do find it a little odd. Wasn't there several fighters that left Factory X but kind of remained in the area and formed their own team?
Yeah, they've basically just moved on to a gym in the relatively same area.
Isn't that like Adrian Yanez and all those other guys?
Yeah, Yusuf Salal, I want to say he's still there, but he's kind of in between gyms. Roy Val left. A lot of the notable fighters have really moved away from that gym, which is kind of interesting. But it is. This article from 2002 talking about cancer of the kidney for Mark Montoya.
I tell you, maybe the guy's just sick, and you got to step away from. You got to handle family stuff and health stuff and personal stuff. And we don't know, but all I'm saying is I have found it quite odd that a lot of people have left. But yeah, I don't know. I think that the MMA lab for a 155er, it's not a bad decision. MMA lab's a great gym. I don't know. It wouldn't be my first choice.
Yeah. Let's get into our straight up fight picks. The main event. I'll go Brand Moreno.
Yeah, Moreno.
I'll go Manuel Torres, but it's a coin flip fight for me.
Manuel Torres for me.
Give me underdog number 1, Kelvin Gastelum.
Ooh, I thought that I'd be alone. I'm going to go Gastelum as well.
I'll go Raul.
Yeah, Raul Rosas Jr.
I'll give Martinez
via spin kick to the body.
Go Rodriguez.
I'm going Borjas here, bud. I'm not a fan of Lazy Boy.
I'll go CJ Vergara as my underdog number 2.
Okay. I'm going to go Chairez. Narrow victory, but like I said, Vergara is an excellent play.
I'll go Gautier.
I'll
go Christian Rodriguez.
Okay, I'm going to go on the other side. I don't really know why. Melquizael Costa.
I'll go Godinez, but don't love it for DFS.
Yeah, Godinez. I would stay away from the fight too, and especially for betting. There's no way I'm betting this shit.
Yeah. Garcia.
Garcia, big time.
Emmers,
big time.
and I'll go Medeiros. It's more of just I've never been big on Austin Hubbard.
I get it. I'm gonna go Hubbard though.
I'll get some questions over here from our Discord channel. First up, we got Sam with some of his usual best top plays. I mean, I look at the co-main event. I think the winner's going to get 100 points. I mean, I think that's a fight that you just have to target in terms of best plays. David Martinez, I think, would be up there. I would put Raul up there because that takedown upside might get a couple takedowns, some control time before ultimately getting that submission win there.
Yeah, I mean, top plays. I have. Who do I have? I have Garcia as 1. I have Emmers as 2. I have Martinez as 3. And then I have the main event and co-main event. So, yeah, I mean, it sounds silly, but I just gave you 3 9,000 options in a main event and a co-main event. But I really think that's the truth, though. I mean, those are the fights to target.
In terms of live dogs, I would throw Steve Erceg in there at plus 200 as a live dog. Kelvin Gastelum plus 245 and CJ Vergara plus 210.
Yeah, let me tell you what I put down. I put a whole bunch of shit down. I like Torres inside the distance. Obviously, if I'm back in Torres, I like Gastelum's plus 3.5 and his money line. I like Martinez via KO. I like Borjas via decision. Vergara plus 3.5. Gautier decision. Godinez split decision / Polastri plus 3.5. And then I like the domination ones of minus 3.5 for Emmers and Garcia.
Next up, top punt plays. I would throw Gastelum in there, especially with that price point. I mean, I think high end, maybe 80, 85 points with volume, but I do like that price tag there of 6,900.
And at that price tag, Jason, it don't even matter. You know what I mean? It don't even matter. Like, if he comes through, we're golden. At 6,900, we're golden.
Yeah. Other in terms of punt plays that I would look at, I mean, Vergara is someone I mentioned. I just don't know the high end aspect of where he could get there. Erceg, don't mind it at 7,600 either.
Did you stack?
Question is who's going for the takedowns? But does it? You know, maybe it's a high volume striking matchup.
It needs to be a little bit of everything in order to pay off.
Yeah.
But I mean, if you want the favorite to win, but you want the underdog to go crazy, you know, like that, you can't have the favorite lose in a situation where you're stacking, unless it's really a crazy fight and they get 80 and 100 regardless. But you definitely want the favorite to still win and put up a crazy volume, but you want the underdog to come through like a 120 and an 80. That would be ideal for Moreno and Erceg.
Best decision odds fights. I think the main event likely goes 25 minutes. I think Gastelum Pyfer likely goes 15 minutes. Chairez Vergara, I like that one to go 15 minutes. Godinez and Julia, I would say would be the other one that would be the top of my decision list.
I would agree.
Favorite parlays. God, call me crazy. Gastelum decision plus 450, Rosas sub plus 225. Just give me a 2-fighter parlay right there.
Okay. I mean, let's see if I did this. Hold on. Bear with me for a moment. So let's say I did Emmers minus 3.5. If I do minus 3.5, I get him from minus 485 to minus 210. He just can't lose a round, right? And then I say I do the same thing for Rafa Garcia, who's minus 485. His minus 3.5 is minus 175. I put those two together instead of doing their money lines. I just need them to 30-27 their opponent or finish them. Emmers Garcia minus 3.5 together is plus 131 for a two-fighter parlay with two massive favorites. Not horrible, Jason.
Yeah, if I did Rosas submission, which my Hard Rock app has at plus 230, Gastelum decision plus 475, that's almost 18-1 odds.
I like it. I like it, Jason. We're making money this week. We're going to do some crazy shit.
End of the month, we got to pay rent, baby.
There we go.
Oh, it's best inside the distance fights. It starts with the co-main event. Martinez, Oliveira would be one I would throw in there. Those would be my top two.
What's the question?
Top inside the distance fights.
Yeah. Co-main event, 100%. Emmers and Miranda. That's it. Those are the two.
The Jason and Pete specials for the first night, first fight of the night. If I was going to roster the first fight of the night, I think I would roster Austin Hubbard.
Yeah. I don't think Medeiros is finishing him, so how's he paying off that price tag? And he's not wrestling.
And then 8,200, 8,000 fight. I mean, you got to roster either one of those guys.
Totally agree. It's my nightmare every single week that we play this damn game. But it's always essential because of the price tag. So it's like, I'll be going Manuel Torres, but like I said, if you're in a 150 max, 50, picking Manuel Torres. So even if I had a lean, Jason, I'd probably go 60-40. Like, yeah. I wouldn't go too crazy with it.
Road to the Man Series, over half, 7.5. We got 13 fights. The only reason I will say over is because it's Mexico City.
I know this, dude. That's what I'm saying. Like, all these dogs. So if I told you every fight that I said is going to be close, that would be Hubbard dog, Polastri dog, Melquizael Costa dog, Vergara dog, Borjas dog, Gastelum dog. That's 6. I mean, and I would expect not only dogs but finishes because of the volatility of the elevation.
Final two, captains, MVPs. Because of the takedown upside, I would say Raul Rosas Jr. would be my top captain MVP, but need that finish in the first or second round.
Yeah. Let me see my takedown score. What do I got takedown score? I have the most takedowns for Rafa Garcia, just because I think Pichel can get back to his feet a little bit better than Morales. So I probably would go Rafa Garcia as my captain.
Yeah. Next question's top leverage plays. Haven't seen ownership yet, so that's kind of makes it a little bit difficult. To me, I'd want to see kind of where our 9,000 options are, maybe see if we find a little bit of leverage there. Best takedown upside, I just mentioned I like Raul Rosas. Rank the 9K fighters. So at 9K, we've got Joe Pyfer, Raul Rosas Jr., David Martinez, Edgar Chairez, Rafa Garcia, Jamall Emmers.
I have it as, let me see. I have it as Rafa's 1 for me, just because I think that, like I already mentioned. Mm-hmm. I have Emmers 2. I have Martinez 3. Pyfer 4, even though I like Gastelum. Gautier 5, just because I don't know if he can really Like, I mean, obviously the knockout upside is ridiculous,
Yeah.
but I just worry if it gets extended. And then Chairez is my least favorite.
I'll end on this question here from the YouTube chat where Alex says, do you trust Pichel more than Medina?
Oh, God. I mean, yeah, I guess.
I would be concerned about Pichel getting caught in the guillotine, going for a takedown.
Let me see. I have Pichel scoring 194. And I have, yeah, I mean, I would trust Pichel more than Medina, but you're picking the bottom of the barrel.
Yeah, and the other side is we're in Mexico City. Who knows who's going to have adapted to the elevation that's there in Mexico City. Of course, if you got any other questions, you can hit those up in the YouTube chat after the fact. Myself or Pete will answer your question. Of course, we have a Score channel as well. Link in the description along with our DraftKings contest. And, of course, we have that offer from Stochastic. Get 15% off any MMA package that they offer. Also, if you are looking to get those MLB streets, because baseball season did kick off today, they've got the offer is there for MLB packages as well. Pete, anything else you want to mention?
No, I just want to say thanks, guys. I mean, it's been a hell of a ride. We've been crushing it lately, even more so. It's been really fun, and it's been very, very profitable. It'd be nice to take down a tournament again soon or hit a crazy, crazy parlay. I put together one with just a +3.5, -3.5 spreads. So I'm looking to see if I can hit one of these 10+ leg parlays to try to save up for baby number 2.
That's a lottery ticket, baby.
That's right. That's all exactly, and that's how you got to view it, right? Because it really is.
And look, there is a lot of combat sports going on this weekend. If your book does offer, I mean, there's a BKFC event going on right now. They've got another one this weekend. A ton of regional action. If your book does, Ryzen's got a card as well. PFL is back next week. Actually got a really good matchup as their main event. Jason Jackson and Andrei Koreshkov next week. So it's getting pretty busy here in these MMA streets. If you didn't see, our MMA betting saga took a little turn this week as Jeff Molina suspended by Nevada State Athletic Commission. His interesting how he's trying to spin it.
Yeah, it's weird.
Interesting you're trying to spin it. Yeah, I did bet against my teammate that you happen to had an injury.
He kind of left that part out and was just like, well, yeah, that's how I made money. I just bet, and I did this and that. And you had inside information and bet on a teammate when there was collusion. And it was like, it seemed like a fake fight.
Yeah, I was talking about this on my podcast earlier today where I basically said, it feels like he's trying to put a version of the story of the facts that we currently know. And, maybe there's other facts. This story is one of the guys I do follow on X is Dan Levy, who's been doing a betting podcast for a long time. And he quoted the MMA fighting tweet on this, and he goes, Buddy was involved in fight fixing, and he's trying to spin it. You literally can't script this stuff.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Dude, crazy world we live in. I mean, just crazy. Like, it's like, man.
Does anything really surprise you anymore? I mean, really?
No. In this sport? Hell no. Hell no. I mean, come on, man. Like, I mean, you should never act surprised. I mean, we had a retirement announcement last week in London where she never said the R word.
Really? I missed it when Molly did that.
Yeah. I mean, clearly she's retiring, but never said the word.
I never said it. I just put him down.
Dude, she will be in BKFC. Watch. Mark my words. She will be in BKFC before you know it.
Well, that's true with Connor. I mean, yeah. I mean, definitely could happen.
Yeah. I mean, it's crazy. This MMA world is just crazy. But we do appreciate everyone who tunes in for each and every episode of the Fight HQ podcast. Of course, we'll be back here next week. We've got a fight night card. It's not the pay-per-view, but it's a fight night card. I think it's in the Apex. I think.
Looking right now. It is going to be. I'm looking at it. Joe Anderson, Brito, and Pat Sabatini. That can't be the Josh Emmett, Lerone Murphy? Is that it?
Emmett Murphy would make more sense as a main event.
Yeah, I'm on best fight odds right now, but
yeah,
it's got to be Emmett and Murphy.
Yeah. That's got to be there. Yeah, that definitely screams Apex card.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, he was looking at top
Holy
2 fights.
shoot.
You know where the card's located.
It is not good.
It's not hard.
That's why I came up with the model, man, because I'm tired of stressing myself out over the lowest level cards in the world. I had to come up with something. And honestly, this tool has helped me significantly.
Oh, I totally get that. But that's going to do it for this episode of Fight HQ. We'll talk to you next week right here on the Fight HQ podcast.